Welcome back to Highly Respected. I'm your host, Scott Greer, and today we're going to, of course, have another incredible episode just a day before the big election tomorrow. So hopefully you guys enjoyed that. And as I said last week on the normal episode, but at least on the IQ supplement, we are going to have a special, unlocked, free episode of an IQ supplement this week, probably on Wednesday, the day after the election. Depending on if all the election results are in by Wednesday, we should have a free unlocked episode on the election results and what they mean later this week. So just wanted to give you an update on that and a notification of that. We've got a lot of different topics to talk about today. I'll be shifting back and forth. But of course, I think the thing to begin on is the elections. And as I want to say, before the elections, I got to get my predictions out there. I've been pretty clear for at least a month about my certainty that the GOP is going to win both the House and the Senate and have a big night. I want to emphasize, I think the GOP is going to win the House and Senate. I think there's a bunch of different races that are guaranteed to win. I think they're going to win in Nevada. They're going to win in Wisconsin, easily going to win in North Carolina. Easily win in Ohio, probably. And there's some races you maybe a little bit more up in the air, like Arizona, Pennsylvania, the Senate races. Obviously going to win in Florida. It appears they're going to win in Georgia, too, with Herschel Walker against Warnock, which I predicted that I thought the abortion story would be so bad for Walker that it would impact him, but it appears it's not having much of an impact. So it's a new day in America that Walker can have multiple stories of him paying or multiple allegations of him paying for abortions allegedly, and him just surviving it and still winning a Senate seat. That's how strong of a red year this is. I'm pretty sure that they'll even pull it out in Arizona, mainly because of Kari Lake and the gubernatorial race. I mean, Kari Lake is obviously going to win the governor's race, and that probably will be enough. And also the the widespread rejection of Democrats and wanting to vote against Democrats is probably going to help Blake Masters out there. So I think it's be a very good night for Republicans. They'll regain control of the House and Senate. May just be by narrow majorities in both, but the majority is majority, and they will gain that, and we will go from there. So I'm probably going to talk more about that, the results, and the messages that the GOP ran on the election, on the post-election episode later this week. So we won't get too much into that, but I do want to get into some of the things, the hyperbole from the other side that we're seeing as a result of the possibility that they're going to lose. Now, some Democrats, one reason you got to know that this is going to be a good night is that the sensible types are saying, like, yeah, Democrats are going to lose. This is a terrible campaign. This messaging sucks. While, like, the other side is, like, the hyperbolic hysterics, or going full in on saying that democracy is going to end midnight on Tuesday. It's going to be over. You're just going to have to pack up and leave, flee the country because democracy is it. Michael Beschloss, who is an advisor to President Biden, I always want to emphasize this. He's a quote-unquote presidential historian. Most of his tweets and stuff are absolute garbage. I think he's one of the types who would always say, like, Antifa, that's like the D-Day soldiers. And, those type of brilliant insights. He had a insane rant where he's just, like, screaming about how this is going to have, like, we're going to look back and see this is the day democracy died. You will, if 50 years from now, if we even are allowed to write and have printing presses, people will talk about this is the day that they were able to arrest and kill your children and all this stuff. And it's just like insane, like rhetoric that you could have never seen this stuff even during the Trump era of 2016. You would just not see this stuff. During Trump, there was something. I remember there was a Matt Iglesias, Jamel Bowie thread, which I covered, I think, at the Daily Caller in the time in New York in 2016. And they're like, what happens when Trump wins? And they're going like mass race riots where they go and kill blacks with impunity, and they're killing journalists with impunity. And I was like, I don't think that's going to happen. And both of these were like respected journalists who are just like saying these like insane theories about what's going to happen when Trump wins. Or if Trump wins, like they all thought that wouldn't happen. Or if Trump wins and there are no riots, certainly no targeted race it's that they all predicted would happen and that there would be death squads immediately formed. But this is how they all went about this. This is like the hysteria. But it's just amped up to now where it's not just like journalists like, riffing on Twitter and then deleting the tweets when people notice. It's now, guys going on NBC and just like saying this stuff and just going on and like, this is predicted. And the hosts are like, wow, I'm looking at history. And they're all saying that like, this is once again bringing out the Nazi Germany references. Like, this is like 1932, blah, blah, blah. Like, this is just the ridiculousness that we keep seeing. And Beschloss, I mean, the worrying factor about this is not so much that Beschloss is saying this, is that he's advising Biden about this stuff. And when you looked at that, Dark Brandon speech from a few, I think that was in September, where he was like in front of the like Dracula's castle or something. The red light. It was like supposed to be ominous, and he's like talking about the threat from MAGA Republicans to a republic, and we must destroy the MAGA Republicans. And it's just like a very weird speech that a president gave, and it's. Even Abraham Lincoln wouldn't have given a speech about, like that prior to the Civil War. And they were about to have a Civil War, and we're, of course, nowhere near a Civil War. And the guy just gave this speech, and he once again tried to repeat it last week, but nobody really paid attention to it. And so this is like their theme, is like the MAGA Republicans are about to end democracy, and we have to do everything possible to stop them. And it's not working as a message, but they're going to try to figure out, I don't know what, it's very weird what their audience is going to do when they lose on Tuesday, and all these people think that democracy is over. We'll have to cover that on post-election, our post-election analysis, but it is like interesting. And to go along with this hyperbole, as like liberals are into this idea of civil war, is that they all predicted, is like the Guardian, left-wing British paper, but now it covers a lot of American politics, as do all the major British publications like Daily Mail, etc. They interviewed 3 experts about whether America is going to have a civil war, and all 3 of them predicted a civil war is going to happen. I mean, they didn't interview me; they should have. I could have given them a much better counterpoints, but all 3 of them did this. And you're reading this, and it's like all 3 of them are liberals, and none of them are conservatives. And they all believe that there's just going to be like right-wing terrorists doing like guerrilla-style warfare, like ISIS and Al-Qaeda type terrorism. I was like, what country do you live in? There's this one woman in there who is an acclaimed political scientist. She is a complaint. Barbara F. Walter, not to be confused with Barbara Walters, says that judges will be assassinated. Democrats will be jailed on bogus charges. Black churches and synagogues bombed. Once again, this is somebody who, in her book, How Civil Wars Start, was published with a major book publisher. And this is just like completely crazy. And what her like evidence is like, the Proud Boys exist. And thus the fact, and election deniers are around. And we're just going to see our total democracy overthrown. One guy, Stephen Marca, I guess it might be Marcha or March. Canadian author, once again, probably shouldn't be, also has a book about Civil War on a major publisher, Simon & Schuster. His was like a more convenient take, saying like, I don't think a one party could unify this country, and there's a weakness of institutions, and he's not going in totally into the terrorism angle. And the third guy was a black guy, Christian Sebastian Parker, who said that whites are just gonna do a type of reconstruction, or how white Southerners reacted to Reconstruction in the 1860s, 70s, and once again return to terrorism to maintain white supremacy. And you're just reading this stuff and like, where are these terrorists going to come from? Like, even look at the clampdown of like the federal government. I mean, I like bringing up this example of the Patriot Front. Patriot Front tried to protest a Pride event in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. And I don't know, it's like, once again, stupid, but they weren't doing any crime. And the police like pulled over their U-Haul and arrested them all. And they were not in charge with any crime. They didn't have really any weapons on them besides their silly shields and stuff. And they're just like arrested. And even if you're looking at what happened in January 6th, it's like these guys weren't armed. Like they didn't even have a game plan. They're just like going in and like walking around taking selfies. There was like no like real terrorism involved in there. And most of the terrorism that happens are like these lone wolf idiots who like think like shooting up a supermarket grocery store is like political like terrorism, but it's really just like deranged individuals acting out on antisocial tendencies rather than being a political act. I think it's like the same. Any of these types of mass shootings are in the same league as like Parkland or Columbine. It's just antisocial weirdos killing innocent people for whatever reason they want to ascribe to it, and sometimes they may have a political motive, but it's all the same. It's more speaks to the breakdown in American society than it does to the possibility of serious terrorism occurring in this country. And this is seeing it. It's like Guardian's a reputable publication. These are reputable sources. They are political scientists, acclaimed journalists, and writing major books, books about the possible civil wars for major book publishers. And they're here and just like saying like synagogues and black churches are gonna be bombed by who? Like what? Like what group is gonna do that? Like they don't name them. And they're like, Proud Boys exist. The Oath Keepers. Look at them. And like look at the Oath. Yeah, Oath Keepers is a good example. Their whole leadership is on trial for the selfie tour of January 6th. For seditious conspiracy. They're likely to be found guilty. And it's the same with the Proud Boys. I mean, these groups are no longer even any type of threat that they could imagine. And they always have to go to these groups. And sometimes they'll even go over groups that got completely eliminated, like that are complete jokes, like Adam Waffen, which was like a bunch of wannabe school shooters who had a lot of antisocial tendencies and was actually being conned by some Satanist on the FBI payroll. And like they all got arrested and it's like now defunct. And it's the same with all these things. Like I don't see any type of serious terrorism or civil war thing on the horizon. And all their arguments is just like, oh, there's people who deny the election results of 2020. It's like, yeah, there's a ton of Democrats who denied the election results of 2016. And in 2000, this happens. This is not. There's not any real backing. They don't look at the actual socioeconomic factors that are behind civil wars. They really don't look at history. They just kind of find like one little thing is like, oh, well, there's like a violent protest we saw. The civil war is on the horizon. And it's like, ooh, it's people are not happy with the government. It's like, wow, that's never happened before. And it's like people really have strong differences between each other. It's like, yeah, I think there is something to say that there is like a sense of disunity in the country and that people don't want to, they view their fellow Americans as enemies. But going to the extent that it would be a civil war, I mean, there has to be certain socioeconomic conditions and like institutional conditions with it. And I always go through these factors. It's like, one, right doesn't have any institutions to lead like a civil war, conflict, or a national divorce. As I said, the only institutions we have on our side, I always repeat this, is like the GOP, police unions, and some evangelical pastors. That's pretty much it. And the left has everything else. And they also have the military on their side in that situation. And they have the culture on their side. It's a very unique combination that keeps, a degree of power that it's unprecedented. So they have that. There's those conditions, and then there's conditions that are in our society. It's like there's way too much prosperity and in our society, and most people are not willing to risk anything. I mean, I'm not saying this is like a criticism. I'm just saying this is like a fact. It's like people go onto Twitter and like our social media and they just spout off about civil war and stuff as like a form of entertainment. It's like venting their anger. But ultimately what comes down to is like most people are not going to risk Thursday night football and their ritual, like eating wings for that, and their sports betting and their nice, comfortable lifestyle. Or they're like, and people just like have responsibilities. They got mortgages, they got 401ks, they got things keeping them tied down to the system. And it's not like just one day, like people in the cul-de-sac are like, I'm forming a guerrilla band to take this whole thing down. It's like people aren't going to do that. And anyway, when all these people who gladly predict civil war talk about this stuff, and then people actually act out on what people say, they immediately go to Fed, and denounce these people. So it's the chances of civil war are not there. The reason why the left is doing this is to encourage suppression of their political enemies by saying that the conditions exist where there could be mass violence and black churches getting bombed and all these terrible things happening. It gives them the pretext to suppress the right and to arrest them and to censor them. And that's why they go on the Civil War stuff. I don't think they genuinely believe it. It's more of a political tool to use against their enemies to say that we're in a crisis mode. And if we're in a crisis, the government has, Joe Biden and Democrats have to take unprecedented power to suppress this danger to our democracy, this danger to human lives here. They're going to arrest and kill children. That's what a presidential advisor is saying on national TV. And by getting into the crisis mode, it allows for tyranny to take place. If you don't, no crisis, no pretext for tyranny. Crisis, pretext, lots of pretext for tyranny. And they want like their own Reichstag fire to use unprecedented government powers against their enemies. I mean, they've been using this with J6. They want something like J6 again to happen to, once again arrest their political enemies, put them on sedition trials, and have even more power in our society. And that's always what I recommend, is like, so people don't fall for this stuff. Don't fall for these traps. Don't believe that civil war is around the corner, because who wants you to do this is Democrats and the FBI. They want people to justify their targets against and saying that the number one threat to America is domestic white supremacy terrorists. Like the FBI wants people to hold up and be like, this is what we're against. These are a bigger threat than Al Qaeda. And it's some idiots that they entrapped in some stupid scheme, like they did with the Gretchen Whitmer kidnapping plot, and even with some of these people probably in January 6th. So that's always the thing that I want to avoid. I always encourage people to stay on Earth and look at the situation realistically, and not to get too warped up in these silly theories, or to believe the left's hysteria and be like, oh yeah, well, civil war's around the corner. The left is promoting this stuff in order for them to obtain more power to use against us. And that's something to keep in mind. Next election day bit is something about Trump. And Trump said the worst thing he could have ever said about Ron DeSantis. I was so shocked and upset when he called Ron DeSantis Ron DeSanctimonious at a Saturday rally. I was just livid. I was piping mad that Donald Trump would dare insult the greatest man to ever live, Ron DeSantis. How could he do that? How dare he do that? And I think I spoke for many people in the base that they said that Trump is officially done, that no one will ever vote for him again after he said those rude, hurtful comments that just struck like a knife to the entire base. And so that's at least what I heard from right-wing Twitter, is that they all told me that this is Trump he is officially done. This is like the 100th time that they've said this, probably 200th time that they've said this, that Trump is done because of this one comment about Ron DeSantis. And they're like, he aggravated DeSantis, and that now all of DeSantis' allies are urging DeSantis to run to teach Trump a lesson about manners and what you do. And so this is like a big deal that everyone's talking about Ron DeSanctimonious. It appears there was just like one quip that Trump is A/B testing. He always looks to A/B test his insults and names for people. I don't think it's the best one, but in terms of if you're trying to jab him a little bit, but not become an open warfare, it's probably a better nickname than what he could do is like something like Little D, DeSant sucks, or something like that. It's like I think Little D would be really good, but he doesn't want to go too far yet. But Ron DeSanctimonious, he's like testing the waters of seeing this. And he said this in the context of reading out who's ahead of the polls. And he's like showing himself with over 50% of the GOP support. And then he's like Ron DeSanctimonious with like 40% less support. And that's like the thing that they don't understand is like everyone's like, oh, he really did it this time. And then they do their Twitter polls showing like 67% of Twitter people prefer DeSantis over Trump. And they go full in, and it's like it's time for DeSantis to run. And look at the massive numbers at the DeSantis rally, and they're all going into this. And now there was a new report saying that DeSantis, is probably not going to run against Trump, which is smart. Because if DeSantis runs, I've always said this. You guys know, if you guys are frequent listeners, I talk about the Trump v. DeSantis possible conflict that will happen for the 2024 race all the time. But it's just go on to this point, is DeSantis would be an idiot to run against Trump in 2024 because he's not going to win. He is not going to win at all. He doesn't have charisma. He does not have that charisma. You can see this with conservative media. I mean, conservative media has built him up as like their number one star and like the golden boy. But even like his statements, like even at that rally, the debate he did with Charlie Crist, he's like, the only donkey I'm interested in beating is on the stage, and it's just like so like forced and rehearsed, and he's like nervous about saying this stuff, and he's looking at his little note cards. He just doesn't have it. He doesn't have it. And that's why conservative media is turning on Carrie Lake, because Carrie Lake has it. She has a ton of charisma. Everything's natural with her. She knows how to just own journalists, and it's just seeming like her brushing her teeth. Like it's just like something so easy and certain to her that she doesn't even need to try to force herself to do this type of stuff. She just does it. And this is the difference between the two, a serious difference between the two. And they're all like now talking about how Carrie Lake is the star. And if she wins, she's likely going to win. She will then become the new darling governor to conservative media and to the GOP, taking away a lot of that star power from DeSantis. And people will then see how, or at least admit how uncharismatic DeSantis is when they see her or they compare clips between Carrie Lake and DeSantis. Carrie Lake fires up a crowd. People get electrified by her. DeSantis is like looking down at his note cards with his like terrible one-liners and his like his direct imitation of Trump mannerisms, like with his hands and everything. And they know that this guy just doesn't have it. He doesn't have it. He could still become a presidential nominee, but he cannot beat Trump. What the thing is like how nervous DeSantis was on a debate stage with Charlie Crist and having to look down in his notes and try to score points again. And this, once again, this is Charlie Crist. This is not Donald Trump. Now imagine with Donald Trump, Trump knows how to find people's weak points. He knows how to get under people's skin. He knows how to humiliate people. This is what made him so entertaining in the 2016 GOP race. This is why he loved bashing Jeb Bush, because he knew how to get under Jeb Bush's skin, and he knew that this really fired up the base. And he's going to do the same with DeSantis. He knows how to get under DeSantis' skin. He knows the weak points. And DeSantis is not a natural on his feet. And any debate between them two would be a one-way slaughter on the part of Trump against DeSantis. And so this is like a thing. And like the DeSanctimonious is like just him just trying to, showing the like, I'm aware of DeSantis and what it means. This is it. I mean, it's not probably the smartest politics to like have a jibe against a governor who's up for re-election that you want to win. And he did endorse him the next day in Florida, his Florida rally on Sunday. He said that like, yeah, you're gonna vote for Ron DeSantis. But all these DeSantis stands, like they really have to, all the people are complaining about this and talking about the audacity of Trump doing this. They only have themselves to blame, because they have been tweeting about Trump like he like jilted ex-lovers and like Trump ran over their dog for the past like nearly 2 years. All these people, and it's like I have to remember, it's like, and all these people thinking that Trump is going to lose handily to DeSantis. These people are fucking idiots. These people thought that Trump would not win a single primary. These people thought Marco Rubio was the second coming of Christ. They thought that Carly Fiorina was a serious candidate. Like, these people were so bad. If you went back in time to 2015 and 2016 and saw their political analysis of the primary, then you would never take these people seriously on politics ever again. And these people are wrong all the damn time. You can go back to the Pennsylvania primary where they were talking about Oz versus this lunatic Kathy Burnett and the other guy that they liked. I'm actually forgetting the other guy's name, who is like their go-to, is like a wealthy businessman, and he's not so unimportant that I forget his name. And these people were all predicting that Oz is done. And when Trump endorsed Oz, they're like, Trump is done at this time. And they're like, Trump is still not going to win. Like, his endorsement just doesn't matter anymore. And he is like, we are so finished with Trump. And he's actually doomed to Oz by supporting this. And then they all, they're first supporting the other guy who's like a serious businessman who was like, whatever. And then they went to this lunatic Kathy Burnett, who's a total joke, but she's like base black woman. And they went for her and they're like, oh, Oz has done it. Trump is going to get humiliated. And then Burnett finishes third and Oz gets the nomination. And then all these people were like, time for Oz to drop out. He's going to lose anyway. Oz drop out. And they're like, there's still time for Oz to drop out. And so they try to force Oz to drop out. And then Oz didn't drop out, and now he looks like he's going to win. And they're all like, oh, well, we were all pro Oz for a long time. And they've all turned into Oz supporters too, which is funny. And so all their like analysis has just been terrible all the damn time. All the time. Like they've never had any good analysis on any situation. You really cannot listen to these people. You cannot listen to these people about like how they analyze Democratic primaries, how they analyze anything. They're always wrong, yet they do not suffer any consequences, and people still listen to them. And so the DeSantis-Trump matchup, like, look at the polls. Look at every poll. And DeSantis does not have the magic it to just captivate people. And his star power is going to get diminished when compared to Kerry Lake and others who are rising stars in the party. He's no longer going to be the it thing. He's no longer going to be the non-Trump guy that they all want to rally behind. And he just doesn't have it. Like, he's going to go to these rallies, say his wooden one-liners written from a note card, and like it's not going to excite people. And Trump is like exciting people on the stump. He is back into 2016 form on the stump. He's got it. He has it. And he has the loyalty of that party with over 50% of the support. And even if he gets indicted, like that is going to be a problem for his general election chances. But it probably won't be a problem for his primary chances. Like that will create even more loyalty among GOP voters to him if he gets indicted. I mean, you saw his numbers went up after the FBI raid among GOP voters. You know, it was like about low 50s, and then it went to like 59% of support. And it'll be the same with an indictment. And all these arguments in favor of DeSantis, you know, people gravitate towards DeSantis because for many reasons. There's like people who, you know, think Trump failed and they want the real Trumpism and they think that it's represented and they want a real Trumpist authoritarian and they think it's DeSantis. Then there are those like National Review types who want a more respectable Trump, who they want someone that they can not be ashamed of telling their neighbors that they support, and they think it's DeSantis. And then there are others who just want, a return to the standard GOP conservatism, free of Trump, and that's why they want DeSantis. I think all three of them are on the same page. It's just like they may have different reasons for stating it. I think even the ones who are like, we want the real authoritarian, the real threat to the new world order, I think all those people are in reality, deep down, the reason why they want DeSantis over Trump is because they're embarrassed to say they're Trump supporters, and they feel that DeSantis is more respectable. And they may even realize that it might be a return to form, but it may be with them in charge, which it's not going to be. I mean, all these Claremont types and those people are going to have less influence under a hypothetical DeSantis administration, because DeSantis would just rely on standard conservative ink people and normal Republican apparatus versus Trump, and there'd be no need for him to have an intellectual like publication or like a brain center when he already has like the ordinary conservative think tanks and publications on his side. So that's the thing. I think it makes sense that Trump does this. It probably wasn't best timing, but it's not that big of a deal. I thought it was awesome. I think I look forward to more attacks on DeSantis, but he probably should wait till after the election. There are rumors that he may announce very, very soon. So if he announces, you're going to see all these people are bitter, butthurt, and say, like, you're going to lose. He's not going to be the nominee. All these idiots, same idiots who said that Trump wouldn't win a single primary in 2016. And then it's going to be so funny when DeSantis announces he's not going to run. DeSantis is going to check it out. DeSantis is going to know it's going to be a terrible move on his part to try to run against Trump. When you see the poll numbers, which you see the rally attendance, it's just stupid, and it's going to ruin his political career. Because if he loses, Trump is never going to forgive him, and Trump is going to be alive for a while. And he's not going to, in 2028, Trump is going to be like anyone but DeSantis. No matter the results of 2024, he's going to be like anyone but DeSantis. He's never going to forgive that offense. And DeSantis has to know it. And DeSantis has to be looking towards 2028 rather than thinking that 2024 is his only time. But I think he's going to be eclipsed by 2028. I think there's going to be people like Kerry Lake and others who are going to steal his star power. And then, there may be a chance where DeSantis turns into Mitch Daniels, which everyone thought Mitch Daniels. They're completely different types of governance, but in the early 2010s, late 2000s, like everyone's like Mitch Daniels is the future of the party. Once again, it's like they really should have known differently. Like Mitch Daniels is like extremely short. I think he's like 5'3" or something. His wife like cucked him, and then he accepted his wife back. It's like just so lame. It's like you can't really trust a politician where it's like the wife is cucking you and then you accept her back. And it just like didn't have that charm and power. But they're like, he's an effective governor. We want him as our president. And they're all went with that angle that they wanted Mitch Daniels as their guy. Actually, one correction I have to make is that Mitch Daniels is officially 5'7". I may have been shorter. They all said there was a political liability, but they all said his like time was in 2012 to run, and he didn't choose to run for whatever reason, and now he's like forgotten about. And there's like even same with like Scott Walker, even though Scott Walker chose to run, like everyone's like in 2016 is like this guy's gonna be competitive, and he seemed like on paper he was going to be competitive, but based on his results that he did as governor, but he was like he had less charisma than DeSantis. I will say this, like comparing DeSantis to Walker, I mean DeSantis does seem like a charismatic caudillo compared to Scott Walker, but he once again, there was nothing there. And so people missed their opportunities. But the only opportunity in 2024, and Megyn Kelly summarized this, is that the only way DeSantis can win is if Trump is not running and Trump endorses him. And that is something that those are the conditions that have to happen in 2024. He could still maybe, 2028 is a long time away. We've got a presidential election before then, so we have no earthly idea what that situation is be like. But theoretically, he would probably be in a good position for then. He would after 2026, he'd no longer be the governor, so he'd have all that time to focus on presidential campaigning. Who knows? But I think if he runs in 2024 against Trump, he's going to get destroyed. And he will have no opportunity again to run for president because Trump, as long as Trump lives, he will make sure that DeSantis is never the nominee. And so there's bound to be a conflict, but I think I hear from sources that I know that DeSantis wants to run and he's keen on running and he's preparing the groundwork, but I think he will chicken out. There's so many examples of this. I mean, like Mitch Daniels in 2012, there's Chris Christie in 2012, there's Mitt Romney in 2016. All these people were like seemingly geared up to run and they chose not to at the last moment for whatever reasons. And there's still time to pull back. Trump's running, and I think once they see the base's excitement for that and how like his poll and like even probably primary numbers are even to go up, I think DeSantis may, have second thoughts, and that will be the smart move. So that's my thoughts on the Trump versus DeSantis battle. I don't think it's that big of a deal that he said DeSanctimonious, and I like it. I think it's time for Trump to hit back because as I said, all of DeSantis' surrogates and allies have been attacking Trump nonstop and tweeting about him like jilted ex-lovers and like how Trump is the worst person ever and how they all want like Trump like arrested and executed for whatever reasons. And he's just responding in kind. He's a counterpuncher, as he always likes to say. Next topic is returning to Elon Musk and Twitter and what's happening there. We're not going to have as long as a discussion on this because there's only a few things to talk about. I stand by most of the things I said last week. I think it's be a positive in the right direction. And he is doing things we want. Just by firing a lot of the staff, especially the content moderators, as I always want to point out, is going to lead to more free speech and to better results for us and what we can allow to be said. And he is moving in that direction. The verification stuff, I already talked about that enough last week. We'll see how that turns out. It is funny how all these journalists are complaining about it. Like, we'll never pay for this. They're all going to pay for that. CNN is like vowing not to pay for it. They're going to pay. That's the point of the matter. People are just going to do it no matter what. But it does reveal like Musk is like chief concern with Twitter is profitability. He does probably care about free speech, and he wants to make it more free speech friendly. But profitability is his number one concern. But that's where these NGOs are now trying to attack him on. is the ADL, NAACP, and other groups. They're calling on advertisers to boycott Twitter up until they, I don't know, they have better censorship policies or whatever. And they're urging for them to do this. And there is a lot of advertiser pauses on their services or their revenue towards Twitter. And Elon Musk is complaining about it and, getting outraged by it. There's a lot of interesting things that Elon Musk is doing. He's banning a lot of liberals who are trying to imitate him. He banned Ethan Klein and Kathy Griffin for imitating him. He banned some other journalists who had a blue check mark, who was imitating Andy Ngo. And so there's some good things going on there. And what he's going with, and a lot of people are complaining about how Elon Musk is meeting with the ADL and that stuff, and maybe he's like, we're gonna, try to keep this place free of hate. I think people shouldn't read too much into this, because once again, he is just trying to say, like, portray a sign to get the advertisers back, and simply by having fewer content moderators and these type of people, and having clear rules of terms of service and clear abidance by those terms of service, that there's going to be more free speech on there. And he feels that like this is just the price of doing business. Now, the ADL, despite meeting with them, is now calling for an advertiser boycott. Now, whether it would work remains to be seen. Is that in 2020, they still try to do this boycott of Facebook. This is a Stop Profit for Hate campaign led by the ADL. And they did this in 2020. Now, you have to remember is that this is a year after Facebook had officially banned white nationalism. Like, anyone accused of being a white nationalist who's a public figure got banned. They banned like VDare, they banned Faith Goldie, they banned identitarians, they banned all these different groups of people from their platform, and explicitly said we will not allow anything that is ascribed to as white nationalism on our platform. And they said this, and they're strongly coming down on hate speech in 2019. And then 2020, that was still not good enough, and they're like, we want them to stop hate speech on the platform. And really what this has done is to pressure Facebook to not allow pro-Trump messaging on the platform, and not allow right-wing messaging that had been critical of the Black Lives Matter riots. Because I think this happened, I think it came out in July of 2020. So it was a month or so after the BLM riots, and they were like, we cannot have anyone who's criticizing the riots and Antifa on there. And Facebook was getting like insane throughout 2020 in who they banned, and it was under this pressure campaign on advertisers to drop advertising on Facebook due to the perception that they're allowing hate speech to run amok. And that's what they did. And it did, and eventually, it did work in 2020 to increase pressure and censorship, but eventually all these advertisers came back. And I don't know if Facebook, besides like countering misinformation or quote unquote misinformation on there, especially in the lead up to the 2020 election, especially when they did with Hunter Biden, they didn't create as new of policies as they did in 2019. And also, it shows like how like nothing you do can ever please these people unless they are literally put in charge of censorship, which Elon Musk is not going to do. Elon Musk does have the power and platform to go after these advertisers in a way that conservative media does not. And these advertisers are going to have to pay a price if they don't advertise with Facebook, Twitter. First off, it's like a giant platform with millions of users. They're leaving money on the table. Second, they can lose their reputation by having the world's wealthiest man who has a massive audience, massive fan base, him directing fire towards their advertisers. And he has the money to like wage his own information warfare against them, it's showing like all the bad things that they're doing. And really counterpunching. But even if he didn't counterpunch, I think that a lot of these advertisers would simply return once the pressure dies out. Is that ADL at this moment is trying to gain control of the platform and to pressure Elon Musk into doing what they do, and they think that by creating chaos with these advertisers that they can do that. But Elon, I think, is not going to do that, and he has two options of either counterattacking and pressuring them into coming back to the platform, or just waiting on out and they'll come back eventually. And I think he'll make all these statements like we're stopping hate speech and misinformation, blah blah blah, but you should know that under the circumstances, it's just having fewer Twitter staffers of having a guy who likes to proclaim his support for free speech, that the situation's going to be better than under the previous owners, despite some of the worrying statements he may make in the public. And so I'm still trusting the Elon plan. I think that some people are being really harsh on Elon, which one thing you have to realize is like we don't have the type of pressure or the power at this time to pressure people. Like, okay, maybe we can like have one person get like 5,000 likes or something on a tweet to Elon, calling him a cuck who needs to, man up and name him or whatever they have for this. But it's like Elon is a billionaire. He doesn't. He's seeing what's happening to other people around this time who are making a provocative criticism, and they still could have the ability to destroy his life. But he's trying to have a narrow. He's trying to walk a tightrope here. And I think we would gain more influence over Elon if people were doing like, hey, doing a great job, keep up the effort, like, let's do this, like in this. And he responds to all these people who just say, like, hey, you need to do this or you need to resist them and you need counterpunches. Like the counter boycott was like an idea suggested by somebody else. Like he responded to, I think it might have been Ian Miles Chong tweet, but he does respond to these people, and if he sees the right is supporting him in these efforts, even though he had a tweet where it's like, oh, if you're pissing off both the left and right, you're doing things right. But if he knows that the right is mostly supportive of these measures and is giving him advice to like, hey, here's how you can improve, and and he's like, oh, great idea. Like these things can get to him, and we don't have at this point to like people always like melt down and he's not doing everything 100% perfectly. It's like he's not our guy. He is a billionaire who wants to make profit, but I mean, I think the best way to ensure that he does what we want is to not try to antagonize him. And he may see this stuff and be like, I want to make sure that these people are banned from Twitter. And he does have the power to do that. And that's why he's going after all these journalists, is because he's had enough of these journalists attacking him for years and mocking him and being like, you suck. And now he's like, haha, I have all the power. Fuck you. And it's I like seeing that he's, screwing over journalists. But it's like that. We don't have the power at this moment to wield that. People on Twitter too many times think like, the latest thing that they do is like, oh, well, we have to keep on the attack. We have to keep on the pressure point. It's like we have no ability to wield pressure on them. Like we are not advertisers. We're going to stay on this platform no matter what. And like I don't think he's going to be that bothered by the antagonism, but just in the off case he did, I think people are being a little too... People go back one day from another. Like there was a day last week when he announced the ADL meeting and everyone's like, it's over for Elon. We want Elon destroyed. Like this platform sucks. It's over. And then like him seeing banned journalists and like figures like Ethan Klein that they hate. They're like, oh, actually Ethan, it's back. We're so back with Elon. So every day it's like, one day it's over. The next day we're back, with Elon. So people keep veering back and forth, but I think you guys should maintain a more positive attitude, optimistic attitude towards the future of Twitter and how we're going to operate. I say this and maybe I get banned later this week and I'll be eating my own words, but I think from right now, I think we should trust the Elon plan. It's still going to be better than under the previous owners, and there's still more opportunities to do push the platform in a positive direction and to restore free speech there. But there's going to be troubles and hurdles along the way because these groups like the ADL want to ensure that there's not a return to free speech on the platform. But I think Elon will survive these challenges, and we will have a much better Twitter in the process. Now, last thing before I get to the Cognitive League questions, we've got 3 today, so this is a good one. I'll have some brief on Ukraine. There's a new report from the Washington Post saying that the Biden administration is privately telling the Ukrainians to, hey, don't demand regime change. Just accept that Putin's going to be there if you're going to do peace negotiations. And they say that, like, well, we're just doing this as a pretense to ensure that Ukraine still has the support of our allies that are, wary of the conflict and want a peaceful resolution. We're saying, hey, Ukrainians, like, let's have some good optics here. Let's say that, you accept realistic standards of what you would want in a peace negotiations and go from there. And the Ukrainians pretty much have like no optics whatsoever because they're always like demanding more stuff from the rest of the world and threatening the rest of the world and like trying to own the rest of the world through Twitter hijinks. And, they're always like, they're for, it's especially what they did with like Elon Musk. Like Elon Musk is providing them free internet, free of charge. Like this is a lot of investment that he's doing. And him simply like, here's a peace negotiation. They're like, hey, Elon, fuck off. And they're like, hey, we're calling Elon a traitor. And they briefly added him to some assassination list and all these things. And it's like Ukrainians are like, and then he's like, well, I'm going to now want to get paid for this. So like, you can't do that. And they're literally, Ukraine is just a spoiled child, like going around the world, just acting like it's in charge and it can do anything. And even this article mentioned it is like saying that like, at the end of the day, like Ukraine, like you're dependent on us, not the other way around. Like we could just cut this all off, and you can enjoy Russian domination. And the Ukrainians just don't understand that, and so they keep acting like a spoiled child that like keeps getting money from their rich dad and doing whatever the hell they want and having no regard for anyone, and then like acting arrogant and domineering to the rest of the world when it's like, you fucking depend on us. Like you are a subordinate to us, not the other way around. It's like this one Ukrainian woman is like, these Americans are so selfish and they think the whole world revolves around them. And it's like, the world does revolve around us. Unfortunately, I don't know if this is the best thing ever, but it does. And this is why you beg us for money, you Ukrainians. Like, what do you think okay, how about you have your own little fucking war and not involve us in it? And I'm like tired. Like Ukrainians are trying to get like us a nuclear war. I mean, Zelensky is like, maybe the nuke Russia to support democracy. And it's like, you are demanding we start a nuclear war on your behalf. And they're like so ungrateful, but it's with the signs, like the war doesn't show any sign of ending. I think the only thing that could happen is if Republicans have a fight over funding in Ukraine. They are going to have that if they take control of the House and Senate, but Mitch McConnell wants even more money for Ukraine, while McCarthy is willing to concede to the Freedom Caucus and all these other people who are tired of funding the war. And now nearly half of Republicans think that we're giving too much to Ukraine. And so we could have a reassessment of that. I still don't think we're at the point where we can have enough support to defund Ukraine, but we're getting there. I think it's mainly from the left, as I made my point, like the left-wing progressive caucus totally, dropped the ball when it came to totally retracted their letter demanding, some type of peace negotiation and worries about the concerns the war's having on the entire world. They had to drop that because the whole left-wing base cares more about Ukraine than America. But it does show the administration. The administration probably does, realize like, this war we may not have the money to continue to support Ukraine. And we already got a lot of the win from this war. I mean, we made Europe more dependent on us politically, militarily, for energy purposes, all those things. They're now totally on our side, dependent. We blew up Nord Stream, or allegedly, or the Russians did it. I mean, the Russians blew it up to help our cause, but that's the official line. We've shown Russia is much weaker than the world thought, and that it can't conquer Ukraine. We also have Ukraine firmly in our sphere. They're never going to rejoin the Russian sphere, and we can now just use Ukraine for whatever purpose we want. And we have Europe even more loyal and dependent on us than before, and Russia more isolated from the rest of the world than before, and dependent on China as a junior partner, which is not in Russia's interest. And we've maybe created the conditions to increase the chances of regime change in Russia. I don't think it's still realistic, but I think, what we've done is there. And they may just say, okay, we've already netted a win, and we may be, a little too biting off more than we could chew here. We might as well just take what we have and not try to gamble more, to try to win more. The problem is the Ukrainians literally believe that they won't settle for they will only settle for unconditional surrender once they conquer Moscow. So I don't think the Ukrainians are not realizing that. So I think at some point the Biden administration may be like, we can't afford this war. They have to know that they probably can't, and they're trying to like, if you get a military victory or two, just settle for whatever you can get from Russia, and then let's go. I mean, the United States has already gotten a big win from this, and I mean, what they really want is to try to affect regime change in Russia. But I think they realize that Ukraine doesn't have enough offensive capacity to kick out the Russians from Ukraine, and they know that there's not any serious challenges to Putin, so these things may be a little bit too unrealistic. And also they know that Russia has been able to withstand the sanctions, so they may say, the gamble's already paid off. Why hope for more when it's unlikely you'll gain even more than you have? But who knows? They may keep funding it and doing what they do, and hoping they even get better conditions or even a greater victory for the globalist American empire and the Ukrainian struggle. And I always have to say, it's like, even going from this point with Russia, is like Russia is allegedly retreated from Kherson, the city, not the entire province, but from the city. And they're building up a defensive line along there that will, make it even harder for Ukraine to make any more gains there. But at the same time, they are retreating from a big city that they, captured, and it was like a big victory for them. And, there's allegations that it's like a trap, or, Ukrainians aren't believing it, but who knows? It's still the optics that they're giving up the city. And it's also a city that they just recently announced that they had annexed. They had annexed the whole province. And it does show that they may just building up a defensive line to, have the ability to inflict tons of casualties on Ukrainians while having fewer casualties on their side. And also that they may be planning an offensive to the north or something else, and they may make incremental gains, but they're not in the process. I don't think they have the process to really do what they wanted to do initially in the war, as I keep saying, and that is to demilitarize Ukraine and to get a friendly regime there. That's impossible now, and at most that they can do is to just have some type of agreement where those territories that they annex or acknowledge that Russian troops are there, and Ukraine is probably not going to take that back. And that's probably all they can hope for the war. And it's probably not the best victory for Russia, but it is what it is. And so that's how you need to see. I even see people who are like Russia, cheerleaders and stuff, like Anatoly Karlen, people who are very rosy and optimistic about it, and they now worry that like Russia may lose the provinces it had conquered, the oblasts that they conquered during the recent invasion, and they may be forced back to their 2014 or to the borders of the 2015 settlement. So that would be one hell of a waste of a war. But even if those people are saying that stuff, it's probably not a good sign. So I still think it's the best case scenario is that they just get some type of acknowledgement. It might not be a real acknowledgement. Like Ukraine may still consider those areas part of Ukraine, but they're not attacking those places. They're not trying to invade or take them back, but officially they still consider them part of Ukraine. And it'll be something like the Korean ceasefire that's been going on for nearly 70 years, and that may be the final scenario for peace in Ukraine. Now on to the Cognitive Elite questions. As a reminder, you too can get the power to ask me questions or suggest guests and topics if you sign up for the Cognitive Elite option at Highly Respected's Substack. And that's at highly-respected.substack.com. And if you haven't already, make sure to sign up for the IQ supplements while you're there. The first question comes from Dave. Dave asks, Scott, what do you think? Do you think that Hillary Clinton will run if Joe Biden doesn't run again in 2024? The short answer is no, but I'm going to go off on what I think may happen in the Democratic primary, or may happen in the Democratic presidential nomination process in 2024. With Hillary Clinton, I don't think it's the case. One, the base is not that enthusiastic for Hillary Clinton. I would say Hillary Clinton would be a serious threat if she was out there being a huge draw on the stump for Democratic Party, but she's not. You know who is? Barack Obama, but Obama can't run again. There's a few people, like her husband, Bill Clinton, is a much bigger draw, and Bill Clinton is not in good health. Hillary Clinton is not in good health either. She was already struggling with health issues in 2016. that was, that would have been, there'll be an 8-year difference between that 2016 and 2024. And, she's only gotten older since then. I don't think her health would be that bad. I think she's also fallen more on alcoholism or been drinking a lot more, according to reports. I don't think there's just not that much of enthusiasm for her. And I think she's also been humiliated enough. She was supposed to be the shoo-in nominee for 2008, and she lost it to Barack Obama. She was supposed to be the shoo-in nominee for 2016, and she had a far more competitive primary than expected against Bernie Sanders. And then she was supposed to be the shoo-in winner in 2016, and she lost to Trump. And I just think she doesn't really she's out of touch with most of the Democratic Party. Most of what she's doing is just podcasting. I don't think that this is the comeback for her. I don't think people really want her that much. It's more that right-wing media wants Hillary to run again because people still hate Hillary so much. Like all these boomers and Gen Xers, like right-wing media would love to have a Hillary running again because they made so many books about Hillary. They had so much media about Hillary. It was much easier to hate Hillary than it was Biden. I mean, they finally turned Biden into a villainous character through the Let's Go Brandon thing and others. But it still pales in comparison to how they treated Obama or how they viewed Obama and Hillary. It's not as strong even with Biden because Biden at the end of the day is like senile. He's just kind of like an angry old grandpa on the president. It doesn't really have that real like angering mechanism that Hillary and Obama did, even though Fuck Joe Biden is now popularized throughout the country as in the sanitized version of Let's Go Brandon, but it's more of a rejection against the entire left more than I think Joe Biden as a person. While Obama and Hillary was very much centered around their personalities as well as their politics and as their being representative of the leader of the left. So I think it's more desired by right-wing media than it is desired by the left. People will talk about it like, hey, because it'll always get clicks. People were even suggesting Hillary would run again in 2020. She didn't. Why she didn't run in 2020, it's beyond me. I don't think that there was any serious move for her to run in 2024. Maybe, but I don't think she's not going to be in the best of health. She's not been like that tied in with the Democratic Party. They also no longer view her as a martyr, especially due to the now with 2016, they have to deny that they ever said that the election results were rigged and that she was the real winner due to 2020. She may have had her best time in 2020. I think people are now going to forget about her, 8 years later. They're not going to be as excited for her. She doesn't have the health and stamina to run. She seems like she's also not a natural at this. Unlike Biden, who lived for this, she really lived for this for just like her insane pursuit of power. Like she is not an extroverted person. She's also often talked about how she doesn't like talking with people and stuff. She was just so committed to political power that she forced herself to do this. She said this in many interviews. While Biden lives for like shaking hands and that stuff, there's a lot of people who are like that. A lot of politicians who are just like natural extroverts and they feed off that energy of campaigning and that. Even though Biden is like, probably in worse mental condition than Hillary is, Hillary's just not in that way. I don't think her health is not there. She does not get that boost of energy from campaigning that a lot of these natural politicians do, like Biden and her husband, Bill Clinton. So I don't think, and even Obama, like Obama just loves having all these adoring crowds go crazy for him, and that's who they really expect. So I don't think Hillary's going to run again. But people are going to talk about it because it'll get clicks and they'll point out this evidence. But I don't think she just has that infrastructure. I think she just resigned that she won't become president. And if she did run, I think she realizes it would be a humiliating defeat. Like she might not even win a primary if she ran in 2024, and it may be the final humiliation for Hillary. And I don't know if she can withstand that. So she may just want to avoid a humiliation. But going to the point, now it's going off on the point of what would happen in the Democratic presidential process. I think the most likely scenario is that Biden will run again, but he will get a serious primary challenger. My bet is on Gavin Newsom, and I think that primary challenger will win because they're set for a disastrous midterm results. There's going to be absolutely nothing for Biden to run on in 2024 for accomplishments. What the hell is his accomplishments going to be? He doesn't even want to take credit for COVID. I mean, they no longer, that's like something that they theoretically could take credit for, but they don't. They're not really talking about that because I think they realize like people just don't want to get over COVID. They don't want to talk about it. They don't want to relitigate it. They're just moving on. And even like and he can't even say that because he still has like these left wing progressives who are still double masked when they go to the grocery store. So he's like, yeah, he can't really claim that. No one's gonna remember the infrastructure bill he did. There's just nothing he's accomplished as president. So he's gonna have nothing to run on. His health is gonna be even worse. And he's not going to be an inspiring figure, and he cannot campaign. Like, if he campaigns, it's just going to be one disaster after another. And also, the liberal press is just not that eager to cover for him anymore. I mean, New York Times and other major outlets pointed out a gaffe where he said this dead Republican congresswoman he was wondering where she was at an event. And they're like, this is so rude and outrageous that he would just do this, like asking where a dead congresswoman is. And they couldn't hide it either. Like the affirmative action press secretary they have, Karen Jean Pierre, whatever. They had no response to it. They're just like, well, he got confused, blah blah blah, and they're like, no, there's no excuse for that. And he's just going to have continue all of his events. Like, he lies every time he's on the stump page. He can't help but lying. He's much more of a committed liar than any other politician I've ever seen in American history. Like, he just lies outright, like, about, like, what he does. Like, he says he keeps insisting his son died in Iraq. His son did not die in Iraq. And people just have to do these pedantic explanations like, well, maybe his cancer came from his service. They just, like, there's just lies after lies the guy spews, and he'd just be gaffes, and he'd be like falling down. He'd probably have some health episodes. He benefited heavily from COVID, not only because COVID hysteria helped him win, but also that it limited his campaign engagements, so he could just not have to do that grueling schedule of campaigning that he would have had to do when he was the nominee. But 4 years later, he's probably gonna have to do that grueling campaign schedule, and he's just not gonna be able to do it. It was the same with Hillary. Like, Hillary, another reason to remember with Hillary is like Hillary basically stopped campaigning in 2016 at some point because she realized, like, they all thought it after the convention, like, she has this in the bag. She really doesn't have to campaign that much. She went up and had like fundraisers and did stuff she wanted to do. Didn't really campaign at all because they thought that they had it in the bag. And also because her health, like, and her physical condition was not in good shape. Like, there was the infamous incident at the 9/11 memorial where she, like, passed out and had to be dragged into a van. Like, she was not in good health back then. She's in probably far worse health now. And so she doesn't have the capacity to run. So if Biden has to run against a serious primary challenger, he'd probably melt down. He'd say a ton of stupid stuff, and he'd alienate the Democratic base. And that primary challenger wouldn't even have to run that negative a campaign. He just said, I think it's time for new leadership, and I'm moving on, and I represent a better future. And then Biden just, like, melts down and, like, cusses out the fact the guy's challenging him, whether it's Gavin Newsom or whoever. And the audience takes note, and the media just immediately just wants to go with the new person, and that's how it results in. Which Biden may not take the results well. He would probably drop out, actually, if he knows that it looks like he's going to lose. And his family may force him to do that. I mean, Democrats do not want him as the nominee again. I think the messages of, like, the media is finally covering his gaffes and other things and refusing to defend them, to an extent, they're still defending him for much more than they would with the Republican, but they're getting tired of defending it. It does take signals that the Democratic establishment doesn't want. It knows that they need someone else new, but they're figuring out how to do this. I think the only way that Biden would not run is if his family is so humiliated by all the Republican investigations into Hunter Biden and his finances that they're just like, you can't run again. Like, you're not going to put our family through this. And his handler is like Joe Biden. And if Joe Biden feels like this is going to have a major impact on her, then she's going to force Joe to not run again. And there was already that interview where Joe Biden was like, I don't want him to run, which she is like his handler. So if Joe Biden says you're not running, he may be like, okay, I guess I'm not running. But I think the scenario probably most likely is that he runs anyway. Maybe Joe Biden wants to stay first lady, no matter the cost. And Democratic insiders basically look around and they say, okay, Newsom, run against him. And that primary challenger probably wins. And so that's my thoughts on what would happen in the 2024 Democratic primary. We'll see what happens. There's a lot that can change in 2023. Maybe these investigations could, force Biden to not run again. And so there's a lot of possibilities. But I think from this standpoint, I would bet money that Biden runs again, but he faces a serious primary challenger, most likely Gavin Newsom. As Democrats have a very low talent pool. The fact that they want to bring back Hillary Clinton shows how low of a talent pool they have. All they have is Gretchen Whitmer, which she may be out of that talent pool if she loses on Tuesday. Pete Buttigieg and Kamala, and they all admit that Kamala is not has no chance anymore. Nobody wants Kamala. She is probably the Democrats' version of Dan Quayle. It's they thought Dan Quayle would be the future of the GOP, and nobody wanted Dan Quayle. Nobody liked Dan Quayle, and when he ran in '96. I forget if he ran in 96 or 2000, but he went nowhere when he ran for president. He immediately dropped. I think he dropped out even before the primary started. So he was never, and that I think that's the same scenario with Kamala. I mean, Kamala, they exposed the 2020 primaries really exposed how thin the Democratic talent pool is. I mean, most of the people who do well are old now. Are out of the news. Warren is no longer a star. She's older. She's in her 70s. Bernie is in his 80s. I mean, they may trot out Bernie again, but Bernie had a heart attack on the last run. He would probably die if he campaigned again, or suffer some serious health injury that he just couldn't run, period. And they just don't. I mean, and then they have Klobuchar, and Klobuchar can't run because as DA, she helped out Derek Chauvin. There's no way she can run. That's why she wasn't picked for VP. She looked like a strong VP candidate, and George Floyd happened, and she was no longer a strong VP candidate. So they really, and Bloomberg's old, and the base doesn't want him. They just don't have. Cory Booker was shown as nobody really likes. They just don't have that talent pool. It really is Newsom, Whitmer, which I don't even think Whitmer's that talented, but people gravitate towards her. I mean, maybe Kathy Hochul. That's Kathy Hochul's the worst. She's the most arrogant politician I've ever come encounter. It's always crime is not a serious issue. If you don't like crime, if you care about crime in New York, get the hell out. This is not your state. We don't want you in our state. And it's that's Hochul is the most arrogant smug politician I've ever seen. It's unfortunate. The reason why Democrats may lose in New York is just because of Kathy Hochul. Even if they had even with all their problems, if they just had a slightly more likable Democrat who didn't look like Cruella DeVille, they'd probably be winning. But they went with Hochul instead. So they don't. They really don't. That's why I keep betting on Newsom. I would. There's ways that Newsom may not be the nominee, but I think the scenario I see right now, this could change, is that Biden will run again because he's senile and he's delusional. And there's several instances of politicians never wanting to give up power. I always point up the incidents of Woodrow Wilson when he was ridden by a stroke. He could not really walk around or move anymore, much less campaign. And he wanted to be the nominee again in 1920 for a run for a third term. And he was pissed off that they did not make him the nominee because they realized he's a stroke victim. He can't even do this. And then FDR in 44, when he was on the verge of death, they thought that some of his campaign events will kill him. and 44. Like they were like, there's one time he did a campaign event in New York City. It was like raining, and the fact that he didn't die, everyone's like, "Wow, all right, like you didn't die, like let's go." And he couldn't really give speeches. He still ran. Like so, Biden, there's nothing going to stop Biden unless like Joe Biden's like, "I'm no longer cleaning up after you." It's literally just Joe Biden telling him no, or him realizing he would lose in a primary challenge. So those are the only two things. So that's my thoughts on that. Now on to the second cognitively elite question. This one comes from John. He wanted me to talk about the affirmative action case of the Supreme Court. And he had two questions. He's like, first, what will be the result if the ruling goes against the pro-affirmative action side? Would this eliminate all anti-white discrimination in college applications? Would the scope of a ruling include any other public or private institutions like government programs or businesses? I'll answer the first one before reading the second one. Well, the result would just be that they would get rid of the racial quotas, like the system as is. Like they no longer assign that much status to you. If you select race on your application, is that they would no longer be allowed to select that as one of the important qualifiers to getting in. They would have to look a race neutral process, which they have other ways of doing this. It would be a positive, but there's negatives that could happen. Would this eliminate all anti-white discrimination college applications? No. It would eliminate anti-Asian discrimination, but they're going to figure out a way to ensure that their college classes are less white because they're all touting it. Like all these elite schools, like Princeton, Johns Hopkins, they're all touting about how they're now white minority incoming freshman classes. They're going to figure out a way, and I think what the unfortunate thing that's going to happen, and there's been studies that show that, if they eliminated these, or if they move to race neutral standards, that what would happen is that they would have 30 to 40% of their incoming class would be Asian. They may not immediately happen with that, but that's a possibility. And what they may do is they still are going to retain the quotas for blacks and Hispanics, but the Asians will get more slots at the expense of whites. But the scope of the ruling, I think, would be positive because it would create a precedent to go after racial preferences in hiring and affirmative action when it comes to hiring and those things. And that would be very good because that certainly hurts whites, and I would create that standard to go. And I'm sure one of the conservative justices would write an opinion stating that point that we should eliminate all types of racial preferences, whether in education or in hiring or in training or anything. And I think that's one thing. But you do have to take the angle that rather than helping whites, it may just lead to a total domination of our society by an Asian elite, because even the arguments they're using this time around, it's all about how it hurts Asians. Like that's all conservatives talk about, is like this affects Asians, like this is anti-Asian discrimination. They usually don't even give they usually don't even give much attention to whites. And even the lawsuit against Harvard, which is one of the two lawsuits, one is against Harvard, one's against UNC. The lawsuit against Harvard is just about Asians. And the guy who brought the case before it, Edward Bloom, talked about how, we're focusing on Asians because they seem to be more discriminated against, and we think this has better opportunity. And Harvard definitely discriminates more against Asians than they do whites. And he felt that their discrimination is now anti-Asian rather than anti-white. And he said that whites actually have greater preference than Asians in applications at Harvard. I don't know if that's true. I would doubt that, but that's their case going forward. And the main reason that they're doing this is because they've tried to do this with white applicants before. Most of the challenges to the affirmative action in the past has always been usually with white applicants. There was one in the late 70s. There was one in the early 2000s that Sandra Day O'Connor said, well, we'll give it 25 years, and then we'll put it to bed. And then there was another one in 2016, whereas a University of Texas applicant, I think it was Texas applicant, it was a white girl, and the courts did not rule in favor of striking it down. Now they're going with totally the Asian angle, and it looks like it's going to be better. I mean, the main reason it's going to be better is because now they have a more conservative court, but it's also, in order for anyone to succeed in an American society with any point, they have to find a minority and say that this is how it hurts. It's bad because it's specifically hurting a minority group, and that's racist. And they're having to do that with affirmative action, with upholding Asians. Is like they're so hurt by affirmative action, and we're so anti-affirmative action because of just how much it hurts Asians, and that's what conservatives are going with. And it's rather disappointing because it's ultimately affirmative action is anti-white, and whites are the main ones hurt by it, and Asians are not. Asians still, even though they may not get all these spots in elite schools, they're only like 6 or 7% of the population, yet they're 15 to 20% of most elite schools. So they're still overrepresented. While whites are not, or a lot of these elite schools, we're the minority at these elite schools. We're no longer there. We're not 57% of the elite schools. Most of these places are minority white at a lot of elite universities. And no one cares about that. And they all celebrate about how they're minority white now. Nobody celebrates that they're only 20% Asian versus 35% Asian. And so that's something to consider in mind, is that still under these quotas and stuff, Asians are still twice the they're still overrepresented at elite universities by at least twice their population, if not more. And the result that could be is just that now Asians take over entire elite universities, and I would say that that's probably not the best, most ideal situation that would occur if we have an entire elite that doesn't have much reverence for American heritage, doesn't trace itself back to the founding fathers, and is more willing to encourage the erasure of our heritage and a new national mythology built around how non-whites built this country and whites are the villains, a very 1619 project view of America. And Asians are very into this. They're very, a lot of these left-wing movements have a lot of East and South Asian leadership. And so that's something to consider. I still think it would be good because it's a radical change. It creates a precedent, and there's a possibility it could lead to a pushback against anti-white discrimination. But I am a bit skeptical about what the results could happen there, and that we'd still anti-white discrimination in place, but there would be no anti-Asian discrimination, and that creates a whole new host of problems if they are 40% of all elite college students in America. Now the second part of the question from John. This one, he asks, how would the fallout from a ruling against affirmative action compare to the Dobbs versus Jackson, Oregon case that overruled Roe v. Wade? I'm inclined to believe this would be something Republicans can campaign on, unlike the abortion-related ruling that some Republicans ran away from. Do you agree? I actually agree with that. I think affirmative action is it's how it's phrased. Usually if they do it, it's do you believe that universities have an obligation to diversify their student body? And most Americans will, unfortunately, support that. But when they say, do you support using race as a metric for allowing students, or using that as a basis to for college applications and job applications, the majority of the population opposes that. So it's usually how poll numbers work. I think only blacks are the only ones where it's a majority of the population supports that. I'd have to check it, but for Hispanics, Asians, and of course whites, it is overwhelming opposition to that. With whites, it's 2/3, and so it's much more popular of an issue for people overturning it. It's also harder for the people for the defendants to say uphold it, because they're we have an obligation to diversity and we have to see race. Is that still at this time the normie NPCs of America still want to view everything is why are you so cared about race? Let's be colorblind. Let's just see each other as Americans. That's still a popular position among the population, and liberals would be going against that, and that would be a weaker position. And even when it comes to Dobbs, abortion, I always thought it may cost Republicans some seats in this election. I didn't believe it would cost them the majorities that they expected, but it may be a slimmer majority than it would be before. But with affirmative action, I think that they would be much more on the side of the masses and popular approval versus abortion. and they would campaign on it in 2024 and being like, now we need to go after racial quotas and hiring and all this. And that would be a much more popular stance. But it would occur in 2023, so not in an election year, but I think the ramifications of it would be in 2024. And I don't think it would be a political gift to Democrats in the way that the Dobbs decision was, even though the Dobbs decision may have not been that much of a political gift, depending on the results on Tuesday. And I actually don't think it will be that much of a political gift, even though prior to it, Democrats had literally nothing to run on, and they had, except for threats to democracy, and then they were able to add abortion to it and Ukraine, and it appears it didn't help them that much. I mean, it helped them a little bit but not enough to stave off defeat, as it appears right now. So I would agree with that stance. I think Republicans would be much more enthusiastic about it, much more willing to campaign on it, and it would be met with greater degree of popular approval than the abortion decision. Now the third and final question comes from Jay. He asks, Scott, there's a lot of talk on our side about the managerial class and elite theory. Not so much from you, but from a lot of our guys. I sometimes talk about it, but I'll get into some of the questions about that. One topic I don't see being talked about on our side in regards to the managerial class is automation. What, if any, is the impact of automation having on this class of people are going to have? I think the one thing with the managerial elite, it's an interesting theory, but I think our side doesn't fully understand it. I think they just need like a new term to attack like their political enemies. So they like the term managerial elites, and James Burnham is becoming more popular. But even the managerial revolution that Burnham predicted was different from what people mean by managers, because some people just say it's like, well, like increasing their economy became more corporate and bureaucratic, and that's what they were sort of mean. But he really meant like managerial revolution is like a government managed economy. Like he saw like fascism and communism as the future of the world when he originally wrote Managerial Revolution. Obviously that was wrong, and so that's what he really meant by that. And then like the elite theory with the transition elites and competition between that, I'd have to do that for another IQ supplement on that matter. But when it comes to automation with the managerial elite, well, it's like defining who the managerial elite is. In some ways, like conservatives just say like anyone with a college education who works in a job that's like more technocratic or bureaucratic, like they work in a corporation and they're like a manager, or they're like McKinsey is like the managerial elite, and it's a little bit ambiguous and vague about what they mean by it, but they're going to go along with it, and whether automation would hurt them. Well, for some professional jobs, there's going to be a degree of automation that is going to take jobs away. Like there is like some AI programs that they're doing that can that may eliminate accounting and some legal jobs. I don't think automation is going to hurt the medical field, even though we may want some robot surgeons with like some of the people we're going to from going to the third world for doctors. I don't know. Maybe I don't know how people would interact with like a robot, like time to open you up. I don't know how many people would like their surgeon to be an actual robot, but who knows? So there is some issues with that. Automation is primarily, automation primarily hurts low skilled labor. It's like when you walk into a fast food restaurant and you see a kiosk where you don't even have to interact with the cashier and you just hit in your order. That's primarily hurting low skilled labor, and it's also the same with like automation of that they're getting more machine work done and farm labor and manufacturing and that stuff. Automation primarily hurts low skilled labor, but it can hurt the professional classes, the white collar classes too, to do a lot of their jobs and services. So that will be leading to a depletion in that. In terms of like, you could say that it then increases more of their power, that they're oppressing the working class by having more automation, or with like truck drivers, like they're worried about having self-driving trucks on the road. Those are, so it's once again primarily hurting the working class, if you will, rather than the white collar class. So I don't know the effect of it. Well, it depends on what you're talking about with a managerial elite and this stuff and whether it increases their power. I think it's just like a natural result of technology. In some ways, there was like a lot of fears of automation when it originally came, when there was a much more of a move to this populism and economics first style populism that a lot of people were going with. Like Tucker was really worried about self-driving trucks and how it hurt the working class. But the thing that it's not realized is that we have a truck driver shortage and we're having to import truck drivers. We're having to get immigrants here because, which I want to say that it's like, that's not an argument for immigration. I'm just saying that this is what they're doing because there is a shortage of workers. And to feel that out that field. And there is the same with a lot of the blue collar class. And I think a thing that we don't realize with when we talk about a lot of these working class issues is that we no longer have the human capital to work a lot of these jobs. And when you complain about the service sector and that stuff, and it's like, a lot of them don't speak English and stuff. It's like, yeah, well, that's happened because white people don't want to work those jobs anymore. And it's not like saying like, oh, because they're too lazy. It's like, no, they're trying to find better jobs and they view it as menial and beneath them. And so they want to get jobs that are better paying. And we typically assign like the menial jobs to the lowest rungs of our society. And a lot of people just think it was like, well, if we just had better wages and stuff. It's like, no, a lot of these people have moved on to other jobs. And a lot of these jobs like people don't want. It's like being fruit pickers and stuff. It's like people don't want to do that job, even if they're getting paid like something. It's like menial. It's like low status. And like people are like, I'm a fruit picker. And it's like, no one's gonna like, wow, you must be hyper successful. Even though a lot of people on right-wing Twitter think that like the most successful job you can be is like being a hole digger or something. Like this is the real elite of society. And they also believe that automation is going to primarily hurt white collar jobs when it's actually, they could have easily invented a robot to dig holes and other things and eliminate the need for, well, they already have robots and mechanics to do that stuff and or automation for that. So when it comes to that question, I think it's just a march of technology. I don't think it'll have any real effects on how our economy structure and our class structure is. There may be more cases that white collar people are put out of work, I guess, if you include them in the managerial elite. And that's not good. That's not good. But for a lot of this low collar, the automation, a lot of that is good for the low collar work because it prevents us. It's good to prevent more immigration or having these people like, we need immigrants for these jobs. It's like, why don't you just switch to automation? That may be more expensive, but it'll ensure that you're not having to bring in cheap foreign labor here. As a huge problem with that stuff is that we just don't have enough people for these jobs who are, Americans. And that's why they try to import people, and automation presents the opportunity of eliminating that argument that, we need it for our economy, a labor shortage, and just saying like, well, time to turn to automation. So it presents that good opportunity for us. I mean, there is some downsides to it, is that it may hurt people, Americans who are already working here, but it also presents the opportunity that these companies would be less eager for foreign labor. Maybe that might be a fool's hope, but they would still, if they're all switching to automation, they no longer have to worry about the labor shortages. With that, robots don't need days off and weekends or good pay to raise a family of robots. So that's something to keep in mind. So that's it for today's episode. Hopefully I answered that question. I guess I need to talk more about the managerial elite and our managerial class and elite theory. I think with the managerial class in general, I think it's usually used as just a new cool term to describe our enemies and like the system, but it may not actually accurately describe the system that we have. But that's a topic for another day. That's probably a good topic for an IQ supplement. I've been meaning to do something on Burnham, and a lot of this is also coming from San Francisco. So we'll do that someday soon. But until then, you'll have to be happy with the IQ supplements and regular episodes that I'm giving you. So that's it for today's episode. As a reminder, as I said at the beginning of the show, we're going to have a special free unlocked IQ supplement later this week, probably Wednesday, depending on if all the results are in, or Wednesday, on the elections and what they mean and the results and me discussing them. So be on the lookout for that. And, if you enjoyed it so much and you haven't signed up for the IQ supplements, make sure to do that while you're there. And so that's it. So until next time, stay respected.